In a previous video, I revealed some of the most significant agreements between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint, but I had no idea what I was about to discover and what I'm about to show you. I was shocked by the scope and vastness between the connections of the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Since then, I've discovered 72 more alignments, actually more than 72, and I've prepared a document which identifies these. I'm going to tell you how you can get that document today for free. These might seem like minor variants, but I want you to stay with me after you see this list so I can tell you how I understand the pattern that's emerged from this. Now, I'm going to walk you through right now just 3 examples. I'm not going to go over some of the same territory. If you want to see the video that I made where I go into some of the variants that I think have more significant impact upon the text, you can do that. These are just 3 small examples of the kinds of things that you're going to find in that big list. Now, the third one probably should have made it in that other video, because the third one that I'm going to show you today, it's such a common verse. I'd heard it all my life, but now I view that verse differently based on some of this evidence that I've discovered today. So let's jump right in here. Let's get the ball rolling, and we're going to go into 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 24, and we're going to read from the JPS edition. And it says, "When she had weaned him," that is, it's talking about Hannah, "when she had weaned him, she took him up with her along with 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, and a jar of wine. And though the boy was still very young, she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh." Now notice that it says that they brought 3 bulls. 3 bulls. Pay attention to that. But when you look at the Legacy Standard Bible, which is a common English translation, it says this: "Now when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with a 3-year-old bull." So the Masoretic Text, which is represented by the JPS edition that we read, has 3 bulls, and the Legacy Standard Bible, which is typically a translation of the Masoretic Text, but has veered here away from the Masoretic Text and actually followed the Septuagint and some other evidence. And instead of saying 3 bulls like the Masoretic Text, it says a 3-year-old bull. Now, modern translations like the ESV, the NIV, the Christian Standard Bible, the New American Standard Bible, the RSV, and others follow the reading that's given in the Septuagint, just like the Legacy Standard Bible does. Well, does that matter? Does it matter if it's 3 bulls or a 3-year-old bull? Is there any significance to this? Well, again, when I show you this list, you're going to see this. There's a pattern that emerges here. So this is a small details of a great painting that something begins to emerge out of it. So stay with me with this. But it doesn't matter in the scope of salvation and did Jesus die for your sins? Not that kind of thing, but a pattern on how these ancient texts were transmitted. And it may challenge your thinking here a little bit. But what's the evidence for this one? So the evidence here, obviously the Masoretic Text is going to read just like the JPS edition, which the Jewish translation that we read from. However, the Legacy Standard Bible is following evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint, and the Syriac. So there's quite a bit of external evidence for this. And the internal evidence is pretty clear in a way, like when you read verse 25, because it's just talking about a bull that gets sacrificed in the very next verse. However, there are some scholars that have argued the opposites of this based on some internal grounds. So there's a lot of scholarly discussion on how to understand this verse. Now, one thing should be noted: for a family of pretty much any size, giving 3 bulls in the ancient world, this would have been a major undertaking, a major sacrifice that's going to be made. But in the minds of many modern translators, the LXX, which agrees with the Dead Sea Scrolls here, has preserved a more ancient, or maybe the original reading here. And so that's debatable. It's something that could be discussed, but this is the kind of evidence that I'm going to be laying out for you today. And I want you to stay to the third one, because the third one, again, it might be something super minor to you, but it sort of blew my mind. So real quickly, on to the second one. And again, we're hurrying on to when I show you this list. But Isaiah 49, verse 17. Again, I'll read it from the JPS edition. "Swiftly your children are coming. Those who ravaged and ruined you shall leave." Now, the difference here is that instead of children, the Septuagint has builders. Now, the Septuagint's not alone. There's a Targum, the Vulgate. These also agree with the Septuagint, but significantly, the Dead Sea Scrolls, our most ancient Hebrew text here, agrees with the LXX. And Many modern translations, again, the Legacy Standard Bible, would agree with the Septuagint reading here, builders. And this is a difference of vowel pointing. So if you don't know, the Hebrew text is written up in consonants, and the Masoretic scholars added vowel pointings later on to make sure that we could pronounce these words properly. And so this is a difference not in the consonantal structure, but in the Hebrew text would have been pointed for these vowel pointings. However, the evidence is pretty clear how the ancients were reading this text. They were understanding this to be builders instead of children. So this is a place where I think the Septuagint, especially when it aligns with the Dead Sea Scrolls, Targum, Vulgate, all of that, can provide clarity where the Hebrew text itself might be a little bit ambiguous. Now, I want to give you my third one, which sort of blew my mind a little bit. Third one is in Hosea chapter 14 and verse 2, or 14 and verse 3. Different Bibles will break up the versification just a little bit differently here. But Hosea chapter 14, I'm going to read from the JPS edition. This is the 1917 edition. Take with you words and return unto the Lord. Say unto him, forgive all our iniquity and accept that which is good. So will we render for bullocks, the offering of our lips. Now, I heard this verse so many times growing up as a kid, and hearing this as the calves of our lips. That is, we'd offer our lips as almost like sacrificial animals. However, what I didn't know at the time, and what I just recently uncovered, I was unaware of this, is that the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint, instead of having calves of our lips, has fruit of our lips. Now, why does that matter? What's the difference there? Well, in my previous video, I talked about a threefold chord. I find it very noteworthy when you have an agreement between the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint, and a New Testament quotation of the Old Testament. This verse is brought forward to us in part in the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 15, we have this: by him, therefore, let us offer the sacrifice of praise to God continually. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. That phrase, fruit of our lips, is identical in the book of Hebrews, in the Greek New Testament, as it is in the Septuagint, in Hosea. And so most every scholar who has researched this, now there's other places like Isaiah that talk about fruit of our lips, but almost every scholar who has written a commentary on this recognize that this quote is going back to Hosea. And it seems to me that we have good grounds to say that we have this threefold chord. Solomon says the threefold chord is not easily broken in another context. Threefold chord where we have the Septuagint, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the New Testament aligning with this reading here. And so it's really challenged my thinking on this verse. But not only that, we also have the Syriac that also agrees here. So those are three examples of these tiny differences. And again, after I show you this list, I'm going to talk to you about this pattern that emerges as we look at this. Now, I told you I would share with you this entire document and tell you how you can get it for free. So let me just first share with you my screen here so that you can see what this document looks like, and again, I'll tell you how you can get this for free. But I've cited the Masoretic Text first. I've given information of where I got this information and some of those things. But as you can scroll through here, some of these variants I've touched on in other videos. Exodus 1:5, for example, was it 70 people that went down to Egypt, or was it 75? I list that variant out. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint say 75, and Stephen in the New Testament says 75. And so again, that was one of the examples I gave of a threefold chord. There was quite a bit of evidence here, and what began to shock me is not the depth of the evidence, like how much it impacted a particular verse, but how many times, in very tiny ways, in very small ways, these scriptures began to align, like the Septuagint would begin to align with the Dead Sea Scrolls. For example, in Deuteronomy 32, verse 43, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint, the Samaritan Pentateuch, the Syriac, the Targum, Vulgate. As far as external evidence goes, that's massive evidence. They align against the Masoretic Text. The Masoretic Text has his land, his people, whereas those versions have his people's land. And so that those are the kinds of differences that we're talking about. Now, again, I'm going to tell you how to get your own copy, but I want to let you know that I'm going to talk to you about after I tell you how to get your copy of this, I'm going to tell you the kind of pattern that I think has emerged from this, which has really made me kind of rethink some of this. And if you are let's say you're a Septuagint only person, you think maybe the Septuagint is flawless. I've presented evidence here for the Septuagint, but I also want to talk to you about some evidence that I think may go in some way against the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls, actually. And so I want to give you that example. Let me just tell you now how you can get a copy of this. So in the description below, I've left a link, and I've titled it My Landing Page. All you got to do, click on that link, and that will take you to my landing page, and that will give you a way that you can download this document for yourself. So if you want to, you could screenshot this or something. You could get all these examples that way, but if it's more handy for you just to have the whole document, you can do that as well. So I told you that I would talk to you about the pattern that emerges from all of this. The pattern for me was this, that many times where it would be very easy to dismiss the reading of the Septuagint, I found that these readings for the Septuagint often align with our most ancient Hebrew manuscripts that we have. Not only that, but I also found that many times when I thought that it might just be a translation difference in the Septuagint, oftentimes, so in other words, like an interpretation of the Septuagint translator, that he was just kind of, free-handing it as it were, and taking some license as a translator. What I found that we have evidence that no, there was probably a Hebrew text that verified some of these readings. So these are just overall patterns. It's not to say that there wasn't a lot of liberty that was taken by some of the Septuagint translators, but it was just striking to me that many of these Septuagint readings could not be dismissed lightly. Now, I told you that I would tell you, for those of you that maybe are Septuagint only or think that the Septuagint can't have a mistake, I want to challenge you with one. And this is interesting because this is one of the places where the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls actually do align. And in 2 Samuel chapter 4 and verse 1, it says, "The son of Saul heareth that Abner is dead in Hebron, and his hands are feeble, and all Israel have been troubled." Now, the Septuagint, actually, instead of son of Saul, has Mephibosheth in place of son of Saul. The Dead Sea Scrolls had the same thing. But I challenge you, look at the context of 2 Samuel 4 and verse 1. It's not talking about Mephibosheth. It's talking about Ishbosheth. And so this is a place where I think the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls actually have it wrong. Now, if you think I'm wrong about that, show me in the comment section. I'd be interested to see the evidence. So enough for now. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.